Hi, and welcome to the 5th episode of the High Frequency Podcast. Today I'm joined by longtime Wellington DJ Hamish Wah. He goes by the name of Mishaesha Tinabe, and he's been on and off the Wellington music and club scene for about 20 years now. He used to do vinyl-only warm-up sets for my movement parties at Laundry back in 2017 and 2018, and he has a wealth of experience when it comes to DJing and track selection. He's also hosted many radio shows across New Zealand over the years, and today was a really interesting chat about the history of music and clubbing in Wellington, and also about DJing in general and the importance of track selection. He's done an awesome 60-minute vinyl-only mix of his favourite records that he's collected over the years, so please do stick around for that. Enjoy the chat with Mishaesha Tinabe. So, Hamish, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, man.
For those who are listening, so Hamish, I've invited him on with a little bit of a different angle towards this podcast. He's not, I guess he's not currently playing many gigs. I know he plays the odd one and two, but he did play a gig or two for me back in the day when I used to host parties at Laundry under a different brand. And obviously this is now the High Frequency Podcast under the new brand. So I really wanted to get Hamish on because I know he has a stellar record collection, and I know he's got quite a lot of experience in the Wellington music scene for 20 plus years now. So, Mish, I guess the first thing that I really wanted to talk to you about is kind of like your history, how you got into DJing. Maybe tell me a little bit about the music that's inspired you and how it all came about.
Yeah, sure, man. I first got into like DJing and music when I was in secondary school. So I grew up in Wanganui, which is up the coast there, a couple of hours in a small school and small town. And a couple of mates of mine, his sister's boyfriend used to run a mobile disco, and we got to it was probably like our sixth form year or seventh form year, so that's like year last years of secondary school. And we started going to parties and drinking and all that type of thing. And mates decided that they hired this place, and they got Des, who his name's Des Taweri. He's quite he runs Native Sound Systems up in Wanganui and does a whole bunch of music production stuff around the place at the moment. He turned up. He's got these big JBL speakers, and he had a Denon CDJ mixing console, the old school one where it was it was a rack mounted type thing, and it had the green and the red buttons for start, play and pause, and a fader for the pitch, and a CD players. And so we had this party, and I'd never seen this stuff before, and we were playing well, back then it was like Dr. Dre, Tupac stuff, Fatboy Slim was just coming on the scene and things like that, and I was just like fascinated by the CDJ thing where you could mix music and you could change the tempo of the songs and mix them together. And so we had this party, and I was like, wow, that's real cool. And we went on from that, and I was into computers and stuff, and then it was the very early days of MP3s, and you could go on the internet and you could download an MP3 of a song, and found the software that you could load up into your computer, and you could play the songs in your computer on your screen, and you could adjust the pitch and you could kind of mix them. And so I sort of was just mucking around with that because it was like a hobby, and I like the music, So I grew up in Wanganui. It was like R&B, hip hop kind of stuff, but then got involved. Sort of some dance stuff was coming through as well. Anyway, so I went off. That was like the last year of school. And then I went off to university, and I went from Wanganui to Palmerston North. So I moved the whole 45 minutes down the road, and we started going to these orientation gigs, and there was all these things happening. And then we ended up in this bar in Palmerston North, and it was called Harvesters. And we get in there, and there's this like real banging music, you know. It was like thumping. It was like, wow, never really come across this before. And I was just fascinated because we'd done this sort of stuff back home with Des, and we'd had a play around with these CDJs. And it turned up there, and I looked up, and there's these guys, and they've got 2 turntables and a mixer. And I'm like, holy crap, what's this? This is amazing. And you know, I just started watching them. And I remember one of the gigs we went to. It was Cuffy. So Cuffy was a bit of a legend back here in Wellington at the time. You know, he was doing gigs at Studio 9, and you know, Cuffy and Leon D were, you know, were quite big in what was going on. And he was mixing these records, and I was like, how's he doing that? You know, the beat is the same, but he's like picking the record up, and it's the same as what the other one was. And I'm like, how's this all working? And so I just got fascinated with it. So I ended up going back to that bar, and soon I worked out what they were doing, and I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And at the same time, I was at uni. I got a job at one of the bars in town, and I was like washing dishes in the kitchen. But then there was a nightclub after it closed down, so it was called High Flyers in Palmerston North. But they were, yeah, you know High Flyers.
I know High Flyers. Yeah, I mean, it's
so this is
the sign is actually still there.
Yeah, the sign's still there. That building's half burnt down, but yeah. But they like had like it was like a real clubby feel. So they would play like club music, commercial club music, and the DJ there was a good friend of mine. Well, is a good friend of mine now. His name was Regan Howier, and I got to know him through the guys at work, and you know we'd shoot up into the booth at the end of the night, and we'd see what he was doing. And at that stage, he was playing these sort of VCDJ things. You know, you put these discs that had the music, and they'd come out every month. You get like a hit disc type thing, and he'd put the music on, but it also come with a video. So they had a big screen up on the dance floor. And they were things like, you know, like Tori Amos and like Amok and you know, the Whistle Song and all these tracks, and just fascinated by it all. But he was also involved in the student radio station, which was Radio Massey. And so he was like, oh yeah, I go up and do shows at Radio Massey. So I was like, oh, you can come up and hang out with me, because I was living on campus. It's like, oh, I do a show on Thursday afternoon or whatever. And so I'd go along with him and hang out with him in the studio, and he was doing radio stuff. And so he was just playing music on the radio, and he was playing vinyl as well. You know, he was, you know, he was playing like Marcus Intellect's records and all this drum and bass stuff and this house stuff and this funk and soul stuff. And so I just started hanging out with him, and then got to know the guys at the station. And they're like, oh, why don't do you want to come up and do a show on a Tuesday afternoon for an hour? So, okay, yeah. And it was like all playlist stuff. So you'd play some songs of the playlist, and then they had a big rack of CDs on the side, and you could play a selection from what the music they had there. Because back then they were getting sent music all the time on CD. So I sort of was doing that, doing a show like a lunchtime show once a week, and I got to know people and all that type of thing. And then it turned out, and then I was kind of like playing a little bit of dancey stuff, house stuff. So I'd really taken an affinity for the house type of stuff then. And a friend of mine from school, Wanganui, was dating a guy in Palmerston North, but he was booking the bands and the DJs for this bar, Harvesters. And I can't remember how the hell it happened, but anyway, he said, oh, you're playing some good music on the radio, you know, do you want to play a gig down at the bar with this guy who had his own CDJ set up. So back at this Harvesters bar, you had to take your own gear in. So you'd take your decks and stuff, but you'd plug into their PA. So I was like, oh yeah, I can go down and play CDs with this guy. His name is LT, and he was actually in the Mother's motorcycle gang in Palmerston North, but he had his CDJs. He had these Vestax CDJs, and they were all on one unit with a mixer in the middle. But the CDJ was like a fold up. You opened up this thing and put the CD in, and folded it back down.
Yeah.
And it was like a green color, but you could mix on it. It had pitch control, so you could mix with this thing. And so I did a gig down there on a Thursday night or something with LT. Played some tracks, and it was all good, fun. And then I met this guy who was working at the bar there, and his name was Kyle Jensen, or DJ Shortstop. And he was like, "Oh, hey man, I played good tracks. That was great. We should hook up and we'll have a mix and have a bit of fun." And so that's how I hooked up with Kyle, and we just got on so well, and hung out together, played music, and I was still playing CD stuff. I was like downloading music from the internet and putting it on CDs, and would buy a CD from Tower Music or whatever it was, and then one day he goes, "Oh, I'm going to buy some new decks. Do you want to buy my old ones?" I was like, "Oh yeah, okay." So I bought his decks because he was upgrading his decks to I think they were 1200 Mark IIs, the black ones, and he was buying a set of Mark IIIs, I think. And it's like, yep, sweet. So I rang up my parents. I said, "Oh, I want to buy some turntables. Can you lend me some money?" And they're like, fortunate enough, they said yes. And I managed to. Then I went an HP to mixer from the Rock Shop. So I put that on hire purchase because I was earning money at that stage, so I could afford to hire purchase something. And so I bought my first set of decks from Kyle in a mixer, and then another guy. And then I was like, "Oh fuck, I need to buy some records." So I bought some records off a guy. His name is Reese Resonance, and bought like 10 records off him because he needed some money or something. He needed to get rid of some records, and or buy new ones or whatever. And I bought these records, and then the rest is history. And then I was in the game.
So it sounds like you were messing around with CDs prior to vinyl then.
Yeah, it was.
Because it's usually the other way around.
Well, not necessarily CDs, but like MP3s on the computers, like very, very early days of MP3s. And there was these like programs that you could have on your PC, and you could play the music, and you could match the you could adjust the tempo and match the things. But when you're doing that on PC, of course, you didn't have an independent headphone track to count it in or get it mixing. So you're always sort of just mixing without headphones type thing, just dropping it in there. So it was interesting.
So I guess harvesters and high flyers, obviously they don't exist anymore, but I presume that house music was pretty popular back then. What year was that?
That would have been in 2000, and it's a bit hazy. The memories from back there, but definitely early. Yeah, would have been 2000. I would have put the decks, and then I had a good 2 years in Palmy DJing, and then we would so through Kyle or Shortstop, he was mates with another crew who had moved to Wellington, and they were running the Twisted parties at Phoenix nightclub at that stage, and they invited Kyle down to play like the house room because they were hard dance guys, so they were like trance and hard house. But they were doing these parties at Phoenix, which they were getting like 500, 600, 700, 800 people a month. It was a monthly party, and they were getting like 800 people a month through Phoenix. $10 on the door, and the concept for that was it was 8 hours, 8 DJs in each room. So it was hour sets for everyone. And I went down a couple of times with Kyle, and then got to know Simon and Alistair who were running the joint, and they said, "Oh, well, do you want to do a gig as well? You and Kyle can play. You want to play back to back?" sets at this gig. It was like, yeah, sweet. So we go down there, and it was funny. We'd go down there. The gig started at 10 and finished at 6 in the morning. They'd go, oh yeah, you guys play 10 to 11 back to back, and then play 5 till 6. They would open and close it like playing back to back sets. It was crazy, and then we'd drive back to Palmy in the morning. So it was pretty mad. But yeah, that was.
So Phoenix was a nightclub in Wellington.
Yeah. So where Calendar Girls is now.
Yeah.
In Dixon Street. That was the old Phoenix Theatre.
Ah.
So there was a main floor there, a middle floor, which we played on. There was also a top floor. So there was actually a period there where there was like a 3-room, 3-level nightclub there. Yeah.
Shit, what happened to that? Did it just close down eventually?
Well, Phoenix, yeah, it was like anything. It goes in cycles. It had its heyday, and then it kind of thin off. It got reinvented as Garden Club, 3-level event venue, and then that had its time, and then it disappeared.
Garden Club was on the second floor, right?
Garden Club was the whole venue, but yeah, it was main. The thing was, that was when the smoking law came in, where you couldn't smoke inside, and they changed the law, so we went through a bit of a dull patch in hospitality. So they had the Garden Club, and they had that terrace that you could actually smoke on because it was all open.
I played there.
Yeah,
I played there with Dilby, who is now in Germany.
Yes, old mate Dilby.
Yeah. Because he obviously ran a night at Ponderosa, I think, on Courtney Place, Mikasa, and I remember Matt Empire, who I was good friends with at the time because I had a residency at Mayer, and I played with Matt at Mayer quite a lot, and he managed to get a gig with Dilby, and then we played at Garden Club, and it was pretty cool up there, man. Like when I came back to Wellington for the second time, I was pretty disappointed to see that it had gone. But
yeah. So I know Dilby. I played a few Mikasa Tsukasas with those guys. It was good times there. So it was a great club. I mean, look, literally, these guys would sell it out every month, and it was, they'd get 800 people through the door sometimes. It was big.
Nice.
But it was a big sweaty mosh pit in the main room. It was like full on trance hard house. But loved it. I met some really nice guys like Steve Hill from Sydney. He's massive in the hard dance scene. I met him and hung out with him a bit. It was kind of cool. Yeah.
How many other clubs were there in Wellington back then? Because I think so. I first came to Wellington in 2008, but I was only here for about a year at that point, and then I came back when I met you. I came back in 2010, and that's when I was playing at Mayer and Garden Club. I played at Sandwiches once as well, but I only stuck around for 2 years at that point, and then went back to England, and then came back in 2015. But I met you in 2016 or 17, I think. So we were obviously playing around the same place at the same time. But I don't think I was very committed to the whole DJ thing back then. I think I was just kind of doing it because I love music. I wasn't really seeing it as a proper hobby. I was more seeing it as a bit of a cool way to make money, to be honest, whilst I was pretty skint. But so how many clubs were there back then?
Well, the clubs, the big clubs back in the 80s. I mean, there's many, but the big one was like Studio 9.
Yeah, Studio 9 was awesome, man.
Studio 9 was awesome. That was run by Jamo and what's his name, and that was a template, really. Like it was a primo club, and it was like a dark room with a massive sound system, fuck all lights, and we were coming down from Palmy to do these twisted gigs, once a month, and one of the best experiences what we had. And Kyle, or Shortstop, he was friends with a couple of guys that were involved with like Bass Frontiers.
Oh yeah, they played at Sandwiches, weren't they? Yeah.
But they started off doing gigs at Studio 9, and because we'd come down to Wellington and we'd come down early. We'd get down Saturday afternoon and we'd go to Flipside Records because that's where we bought our records from. And we got down there one night and was like, oh, fuck, Derek Carter's playing here at Studio 9 tonight. We're like, oh, shit. And Kyle's like, I don't know who Derek Carter was. And Kyle's like, oh, we've got to go and see if we can get some tickets. And so we, before the gig, we were farting around doing what we did. And then we went up to the club early and we're like, oh, is there any tickets available for tonight? And they're like, oh, no, it was sold out. And we're like, oh, fuck, okay. And then we went back down and then the guy came out and goes, no, we're doing cash sales. We've got some cash sales if you want them. And like, oh, yeah, sweet. So we're like, $60. We're like, $60 for a gig? You're like, yeah, the cash sales $60. We're like, okay. So we're like, Kyle's like, yeah, we should definitely do this. And so we paid the money, got our tickets for the gig. And so that was one of the nights we were doing the early and the late. And so we went down and did our gig at Twisted, and then we went down to Studio 9, and that was the first time I'd been there, and it was like, oh my God, this place is crazy. And Derek Carter was playing on 3 decks. You know, it turned out to be one of the best Derek Carter sets that he's ever played in Wellington, and it was amazing. And just the music was just something I'd never experienced that before. Like I wasn't on high or drugs or anything, but it was just like, this is like another level of entertainment, and just fucking awesome. So that's when I fell in love with Derek Carter and sort of his type of sound, and got into that. But that was always the big club. Other clubs that were going around at the time, really it was Studio 9 and Garden Club were the big clubs. There was bars and stuff that were going on, but I didn't really get to know them until I actually moved down to Wellington. So after 2003, I moved down to Wellington with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and got to know. We continued to play the Twisteds on a monthly basis, and buying heaps of records, and also was doing radio stuff because I'd done the radio stuff in Palmy. I'd graduated from. Quickly graduated from the afternoon show when I was living on campus to doing a Monday night show with a friend of mine, Jess Mon was his name, Jesse Herbert, and we did a Monday night show. It was called the House Husbands Selection, and it was, I think it was 9 to 11 or 8 to 10 on a Monday night, and we just used to go up there and we just practiced mixing, and we didn't have a DJ mixer or anything. It was just 2 turntables hooked up to the main radio desk, and there was a way of queuing up, because on the radio desk you could queue up tracks in your headphones before you played them, and we did that. But Kyle, who I'd met at Harvesters, he was doing a show on a Friday night. So as soon as I pretty much started hanging out with him, we'd go up to Radio Massey on a Friday night, and their show was the Bass Culture Show. It was 6 to 8 on a Friday night. And it was him, Reese, Jimmy, and, these guys just mixing on this radio desk, just playing house music records. And then from 8 till 10 was the Drop Zone, which was Eccles playing his drum and bass. And they would do a drum and bass show after that. So just through hanging out for those guys, just heaps of people, it was really, really fun.
Yeah, man, that's cool. I do remember Studio 9. We you'll remember, obviously my previous brand was Movement, and then before that it was called Progress, and that was when I was in Wellington, I think 2010 2011, and it was in partnership with Matt Empire, who now obviously now works for Spotify. I think he's still working for Spotify, and he moved to Sweden. But we ran one party at Progress, and to be honest, it was a long shot because it was one of the last parties that was there before it shut down, I think.
Okay. Yep. I think I might remember that one actually. I remember that vaguely. So I remember did do something there.
Yeah, it was good, man. It was like, I mean, the room wasn't full, but to be fair, the room was quite big. Like, I think for anyone who's doing their first party at Studio 9, it was a daunting task to try and fill that room. But we had a good crowd there, and like they were all connecting with the music. It was cool.
I think I worked with his missus Amber.
Oh, really?
She was working at High Flyers.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So anyway, onto the Derek Carter thing that you just mentioned. Do you think that, because Derek Carter's obviously a legend for those who are listening and don't know who he is he Detroit or Chicago?
Chicago, yeah.
Chicago, yeah, I thought so. Because the whole Chicago house scene was obviously huge.
It was huge and a massive influence on a lot of the DJs in Wellington. So Derek's been through here a heap of times. Anytime Derek comes to Wellington, it's a sellout. Like everyone knows. He's been a lot of times. I've met him a couple of times. Really, really nice guy. He's he's just a legend. But
I think Derek May's been through here as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, no, Derek May's been through a few times. Leon is friends with him, so he's done a few gigs.
Oh yeah,
brought him over a few times and done a few gigs. So that's more like the techno side of things, where Leon is. Guys like Leon who does the floor on Active, Leon Bulldog or DJ Coda. I mean, the guy's a legend. He's been underrated. He's the most underrated DJ in the country, I'd have to say. He's the most unassuming, just down to earth, nice guy, and he is super, super connected, super, super awesome. But there was a long period of time in Wellington, where he was just doing his own thing, and no one was booking him for gigs or anything. It's a little bit different now, and he's sort of got a little bit of the recognition he kind of deserves. But he didn't do a lot of gigs for a long time in Wellington. Yeah.
I do remember that I used to play at Sandwiches because, funnily enough, I was actually speaking to Bryce Mason, who used to own Sandwiches. I was speaking to him a couple of weeks ago because in my job, I actually support the hospitality sector, and he's a member of our association. So I was having a good chat with him, and he was talking about Coda and how he was really sort of pioneering his own thing and doing his own parties and stuff, which was pretty cool to listen to. Would you say, because obviously we've not really gotten to like your current, because I remember when you played at Movement, you played some real cool kind of almost funky disco-y kind of crossed with soulful house type stuff. Would you say that Derek Carter influenced your sound back then?
Well, definitely. We used to laugh about it. We used to say, what sort of style are you playing? It was like, we're playing funky jackin', like boopity boop, is Derek sing, and definitely I think one of the tracks I played at the Movement gig was like his version of Glasgow Jazz, DJ Q Glasgow Jazz, and just that real funky bassline stuff, but with a up tempo jacky sort of beat, and that's, if I was to describe my style, if I was playing a club, that would definitely be it. Yeah. It's always going to be funky. It's not progressive house. I'm definitely not progressive house at all. I'm more, up tempo, funky type beats rather than techno. It's hard to. You don't want to say it's not cool, but I was never into prog house. I never got it, I was more into funky stuff. So, and not funky, full on disco stuff, but just stuff that has that sort of underground, sort of, funky bassline feel to it,
Something that has the groove, man.
Yeah, the groove, right? The groove. That's it. The groove, the groovy stuff, like the filtered disco from France, the stuff out of Chicago, New York to some extent, the West Coast, American stuff. There's a lot of stuff coming out of West Coast labels, Malta Music, Naked Music stuff, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's the sort of stuff I love as well, and that's why I really enjoyed your set at both the movement gigs, because it was not only perfect warm-up music, but it was really it got people dancing. And I think that's the main thing. Like, at the end of the day, when you're a DJ, what's your responsibility? To make people dance. And I think some people these days, probably forever, people have got so, and I'm guilty of this, I've done it myself, you get so caught up in your own playing what you want to play, and what you want to play might be the right thing to do, but at the same time, you've got a job there to make people dance. And if you're playing progressive house all night and people aren't there for progressive house, you're not really doing your job properly.
There's nothing like there's a difference, and this is where I've done a lot of radio, and where you don't have a dance floor or anything, so radio can be quite, you're doing it for yourself. And I'm quite conscious of when I do radio shows, especially like daytime ones. Like, I do the stuff on Saturday afternoons on Active, and we did the late afternoon show on Active for a while. It's like, you've got to keep the listener in the top of mind. Like, Active is a very, very broad listenership, right? So if you just go on there and play an hour of Jack and house music, that's cool, but actually, to keep the listeners engaged who aren't into that sort of subset, you need to do maybe like play 3 tracks in a row, do a little mix, but then move on, like keep it interesting. And it's the same with dance halls, right? If you play the same stuff over and over and over, people can get bored, and you got to recognize what situation, right? If you're in a club, peak time, and everyone's on it, yes, you've got to just keep slamming it. That's when you go. But if you're playing a warm-up set, and there's a few people in the bar, you've got to play a little bit, to keep people interested. You play a certain style, and that might get some people up and dancing, and then you move on to something else, and some other people get up and dancing, and then you build that vibe, and you've got to be very adaptable. And that's where I felt that that I think I'm quite good at reading rooms and playing bars. Like, I've convinced that if I really wanted to, I could play bars and help them out, because I can play a very wide variety of music, and can recognize that I'm there to serve the bar, not necessarily my own interests in what I want to hear. And it's a very fine line, especially for new DJs that are coming in. They've got a whole bunch of tracks they want to play, get all excited and play them, but might not recognize that that's not quite suitable for the time and place. But it's a lot of people get caught out with that, and they get caught up in their own thing, rather than thinking about, you're here for a job. And that's especially if you're working at a bar and you're getting paid to play at a bar to keep people busy. That's where it can become undone pretty quickly. And
I would 100% agree with that.
If you know what I mean. I'm blabbering, but it's not easy. And the guys that do it well do it really, really well. So guys like Liam Luff in town in Wellington, he's amazing in it. He's got an amazing music collection, and he knows exactly what is required for that situation to play. So he'll play anything. Tack is another one. He's all over it. He's just knows what he needs to do. And those guys have got reputations for a reason, because they're really, really good at what they do.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. I think, if there's one thing that I did recognize about your set, it's that you appeared to be a very good selector of music. And sometimes I think we get, I think a lot of new DJs get very caught up in, or I need to be good at mixing to be able to play a gig. And again, like I said before, I've been guilty of this. And to this day, I'm not the best mixer in the world. But I would say that one of the qualities that I've learned as a DJ is I pride myself on my selections and my ability to be able to create the energy wave that I don't think a lot of DJs are familiar with. I do think a lot of DJs are familiar with it, to be fair, but I think sometimes they get caught up in playing the tunes that they want to play, that they forget that we have to create this upward bound of energy that has to come down at some point, and you can't just keep it there all night, and you can't just keep it down here all night. So I do think that selecting music is actually a massive part of DJing, if not the majority of DJing. You know, you can be the worst mixer on the planet, but if you can select records in the right order and you can keep people on the dance floor, you've done your job.
Absolutely. And some people don't even mix, and crowds go bananas, right? So it's about knowing how to do transitions and knowing when to start and stop a record. And is it a hard end? Is it a soft end? Is it a you just stop, and it's a weird thing. And I remember just when I first got into radio, all the tracks were marked with how they ended. Was it a hard end? Was it a soft end? Did it fade for 5 seconds? So you would know how the track was in, so you could plan the start of the next one. And you've nailed it on the head. It's all about selections, and reading the crowd, and if you can do that, you've got the job done, half the job done.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So, Hamish, you currently, and you have had for a long time, a radio show on Radioactive. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been involved in Radioactive for a while. I've been on the sides for a while now. So I did I came on board. Oh, it must have been when I came back from UK. So I did Radio Massey in Palmerston North, and then I moved down to Wellington, and then I did a show on a Monday on Firm FM. So there was a record shop called Firm Records, and the guys that ran that also ran a radio station. Ryan Salt and another couple of guys. I think Ryan was the main guy with the record shop, and Ryan also ran Ponderosa, which was bar down on next door to Red Square. So I did a show there on a Monday night. I did the show after, it was 8 to 10 on a Monday, and it was after the bassdrop.co.nz drum and bass show, which was from 6 to 8. And back then it was done by a chap by the name of Oscar. And he is now, I don't know if you know Opio, big breakbeat guy. So he's gone overseas. He's huge in the States. Breakbeat, funky breakbeats. He's massive. He just tours the world doing stadium shows essentially now. If I was to say, he's probably kind of like Bass Nectar. You heard of Bass Nectar? He's just got this massive following of this funky breakbeat stuff. So I did this show on Firm FM. Then I moved up to New Plymouth for work, and then I did a show on a Saturday night with a guy up there. His name is Matt King. This is the guy I met on the internet up there. We were into house music, and I met him through a forum or something. He's like, "Oh, we're in the same city, and we get together and mix records and smoke weed and stuff most days." And we did a gig on the Most FM up there. It was on a Saturday night, 6 to 8. Again, the show afterwards was a drum and bass show. Matt did the drum and bass show. He was like 8 to 10. I can't remember the name of the show, but we did a couple of gigs up there under the brand Dancehall Syndicate. And then I ended up going overseas after that, and I came back to Wellington. That's when I started Radioactive, and I started doing the housing project. So I did that for a number of years, and that was good. Just doing it there, and then when my kids come along, I had to give that up. And then I was also doing a show. I filled in for Dave Green, who was over here from the UK for a while, and he was doing the show on a Saturday afternoon. Collective Fetish was the name of the show on the Saturday afternoon. So I'd fill in for that when he couldn't do it. And then when he moved to the UK, I was caretaking it for a while. So I've been on the fringes. I did sell ads for Active for a while as well. So was involved there for a bit. Also during the transition period when it went from when the trust took over and sort of rescued it, and we did the big fundraising campaign. Was involved with that as well.
So what's the current radio show called?
So I don't have a show at the moment, but I just fill in. I fill in for Leon when he's not there. So I'm just a fill in, like a super sub. So I do the Saturday afternoon. I fill in. I did a show for the Late Breakfast Show. So I fill in for them when they need someone. And if Leon's not there, he might ask me to do his show on a Thursday. But it's a bit full on. I've got two kids, like they're 8 and 10. So life, man, it gets in the way of your music career, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But obviously, considering that you've got a long history with having, multiple radio shows over the last 20 years or so, would you say that the radio shows have made you a better selector in a DJ sense? So when you get behind the decks and you actually do a gig, would you say that the radio shows have helped with that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's probably helped me explore my collection of music a lot, because when you're on the radio, you're not necessarily serving a dance floor, so you're not worried about what people are going to dance to next. It's more about what people are going to listen to next, and playing the weird cuts on the other side of that record you played heaps in the club, and then you're like, oh, that's actually a really, really nice track on the other side. Certainly not a club track, but it gives you an opportunity, especially if you're doing a regular thing, late at night, you can play whatever you want, really. So you get to explore and listen to the tracks, it's not like you're just listening at home in your garage. You can't just take it off and put the next one on. You got to actually listen to it at the end of the track. So it gives you an opportunity to, explore your collection and have a really good listen to the music, where otherwise you might just go, oh, yeah, that's cool, but then you might take it off and put another one on, type of thing.
Yeah, I do think that, I mean, we were chatting about this just before we started the podcast, but I do really think that if you own records, you have to know that record from start to finish. So you have to listen to the whole thing, because if you want to play that out and you want to DJ with that and you're actually using turntables, you can't set cue points. You can't see where the end of the track. Well, you can see where the end of the track is technically, but you can't see where the drop is. You can't see where the breaks are. You can't really see that sort of stuff. So you've really got to learn and understand your music. And I think, in comparison to you might, some of the listeners, you might go on Beatport and download 20 tracks, and that'll cost you next to nothing. And you'll probably play one of them in a club, and you probably won't listen to 19 of them. But if you buy a record and there's 4 tracks on that record, you will listen to the whole thing, because it's costing you a hell of a lot more money to buy that record. It's an actual tangible item that you can kind of treasure and collect. And I do think there's something really cool about that. I think it's kind of music appreciation at its finest, really. Like, I grew up with tapes and CDs and my dad's old vinyls, and I used to love having the collection in front of me. And I think I've just this is why I'm buying records again, because I want that collection back, and I want that tangible kind of thing. I want to appreciate the artist and what they've put into it, and rather than just buying, $1 a track kind of stuff off Beatport.
Yeah, for sure. I think the old record company in the vinyl presses was a great filter, because I guarantee there's a whole bunch of crap made before, the digital age, that just never made it didn't make it to a physical record, because it didn't cut the mustard for whatever. But the record labels previously, producers have made a track, then they'd find a label to put it on, they'd submit it to the label, and then the label would go, okay, nah, sorry, try again or whatever. But then if they did like it, they would like, okay, send me a master. We'll go and get it mastered, or we'll get it produced properly, and then we'll get it mastered so it sounds good. So there was a really big filter there. You were getting, just the good stuff was coming through on the end product, whereas now it's like any Tom, Dick, and Harry can just bang up some tracks and put it on the internet and put a weird label on it, and it's really crazy. And so that's where I think it all sort of comes apart pretty quickly with some DJs. Like, they may look cool on the stage and they may have some banging tracks, but the rest of the time it's just playing rubbish. And the crowds are there not necessarily for the music, but it's more about the scene, and that's where it all gets a little bit sticky for my liking.
Yeah. How many records do you own, do you reckon?
I have just over 1,000, so probably about 1,100. It's a decent amount. It's enough for me. It's probably it's funny, people with record collections. I know some people that have some real, like, a lot of records. Like, there's a couple of guys in Wellington that have a lot of records. Paul Barrington, Liam Luff. Those guys have got like literal fuck tons of vinyl. But I always found it funny with people that say, "Oh, yeah, I've got a few thousand records at home," and I'm like, "Have you? I can only really see a few crates in your lounge. Like, you say you got all these records, but to get 1,000 records, if you're paying $20 for a record back in the day, 20 times 1,000, that's $20,000 minimum sort of spend over the years. Depends on what you think, but there's a few records there, but I slowly adding to it, but it's hard work moving them. You don't want to be moving around flats when you got that many records too often.
I can imagine. Yeah. So just to finish up with then, so obviously because you've kind of been around the music scene in Wellington in particular and New Zealand for 20 years, how would you say, if there's something that you could change about the way that things are now in terms of the club scene and maybe the music scene in comparison to what it was back then? So if you could change something now, what would it be?
I would change the liquor laws.
Yes.
To enable clubs to be open when they need to be. The whole thing, especially for Wellington, when the whole thing came along, and we're not doing away with late licenses and all that type of thing. Just put a real big kibosh on the whole thing. The smoking thing was a big downer on the club scene as well, because then people, had to deal with people going outside to smoke, and I know it's not good for you to smoke indoors and that, but you can have extraction systems for, it's a thing. So I would say get rid of trading hour restrictions, get rid of restrictions around smoking. Not that a lot of people smoke now. It's not a big deal, but back then it was, because everyone was smoking cigarettes or whatever in the clubs. And just embrace the nighttime economy, because people going out and dancing late at night is not something that's just come along. People have been doing it for years, and by putting a squash on it, it's killed a sector of the economy. I would say just loosen everything up again, and let people go out and dance at night. There's ways in what you can do. I was always an advocate, like, clubs that do late night club music, they only need to be licensed from like 12 a.m. till 9 in the morning. Like, don't let them sell booze for the rest of the time.
Yeah.
You know, they've got a defined period. So just let them do that, and then let other bars do stuff. So I would be advocate for that. Yeah.
This is something that I do in my everyday job for the Hospitality Association. We basically work to try and advocate against these restrictive laws all the time. I mean, to be fair, with the way the governments are now, you know, we can't reverse what's already been done, unfortunately, but we're still working pretty hard on it. But that's all to come in the future, hopefully. But couldn't agree more. And, you know, there's clubs overseas that run for 24 hours all over the weekend, and they have less problems than we do in New Zealand. So what does that tell you?
Yeah. So the answer to the question is, I would, you know, advocate for more club stuff, because it's a real downer when you have to close early, and you know, and that's not necessarily conducive to the people that want to go to clubs, their time frames, because a lot of them are working hospo anyway, or working late at night, so they're not getting off work till midnight or whatever. So I would do that. I would definitely encourage more stuff around there.
Yeah, man, love it. So last thing then, so have you got any gigs coming up in the future? What's next?
Well, we do the Cuba Duper thing with Leon every year, so that's pretty much just doing that every year. And obviously Cuba Duper got cancelled again this year because of COVID, Omicron. We've had a really bad run with Cuba Duper because we had, the first one was the Christchurch shooting, was just before then, and they pretty much closed it all down. And then we've had 2 cancellations through COVID. So that's all I've got on my horizon. Cuba Duper next year. If you want to book me for a gig, hit me up.
I'll drop all his details in the description below, but I just want to thank you for coming on, Hamish, and taking some time out from obviously your busy schedule. But it's been a refreshing conversation just about kind of the history of things and records, and kind of how you got into the whole clubbing and house music scene. It's quite nice to speak to someone who's got much more experience than a lot of the youngsters that I speak to, I guess, these days. So it's been a good conversation. So thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me. And I know I've got to do a mix for you. So I've got half of the records here ready to go. And what I thought I'd do is just I'd pick out some records that really sort of struck a chord with me over the years. So I just need to go through the other half of my vinyl collection and find the records I want to play on this mix. So I'm really looking forward to putting it together, and I hope everyone enjoys the mix when you listen to it.
Cool, man. Yeah, thanks for explaining that. I was going to ask about the mix. I'm really looking forward to listening to it. I can guarantee you all that you'll be getting some funky shit in your ears in the next 2 minutes. So thanks for coming on, Hamish, and everyone enjoy the mix. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.